for all y'all that are here. Thank you for joining. Let's do it. So, little review. Oh wait, I got my first chat. Yeah, thanks. Brittany's chatting. Y'all can join the party. All right. So, review from last week and kind of what the framework of this is. So, um, as an introduction, I'm Stephen Latonin. I run Casva, which is a consulting firm that works with small business and new companies on their growth. And we are focused today on the issue of sales. Sales is something that's important to my heart. I love sales. I think it's a noble calling. It often gets derided as something that's pushy or mean, and I think that's just it's the wrong view, right? It's not what sales is. It's what sales often is, but it's not what it should be. Instead, sales should be an act of mindfulness, of really being present with our customers. That's actually what the irony is that the sales that people think of that we hate is actually poor. It's not effective. It's not geared towards performance. But this is. If you do this, I think you're going to have a much likelier chance of having success, and also you'll just feel better. It's a better experience for both you and the customer. So this is the framework. The idea is that we take three parts of the sales process, the actions that one takes, and we call those the three Ps, and we try to infuse it with mindfulness and what we're calling the three Cs of mindfulness. So for each stage in the sales process, you have a mindfulness component that marries up with it. So for example, last week, and I think we have this on YouTube, and we'll do it again at some point, but the compassion is sort of where we start. We start when we're preparing for a sales encounter, for an encounter, and it can be for any meeting. It doesn't have to be where you're trying to get someone to buy something. It can be any meeting that you're going to have with another party. Before you go into that meeting, you want to stop and say, and open your heart to that person. I know it sounds so woo in the age of business, and that business tends to be feel like more of a cold thing. But what we're actually doing is you're opening up yourself to be mindful of the other person and their experience before you go and have your conversation. So your preparation is actually imbued with compassion. Today, we're going to talk about curiosity. When you're actually in the presentation, when you're actually meeting with your sales interlocutor, your prospect, you want to be curious and genuinely focus on the customer. And then finally, we'll talk about the proposal process and how you can do that with courage next in the next session in a couple of weeks. So all of this is orienting around the customer. So the whole thing that we're doing here is trying to focus our energy on the customer, their needs, their situation, and trying to inhabit their space. So when we talk with our customers, the tendency is to talk about who we are, but instead we're going to ask questions with genuine curiosity. So again, the chat feature is open if you want. This is a way to get our brains thinking, but I'd ask you to either chat this or just think in your mind. What do you think? What is curiosity? What are the hallmarks of curiosity to yourself? Feel free to write any ideas or answers in the chat if you want. So some of my thoughts is that curiosity again is other oriented. When you're truly, if you have an encounter with someone who's being curious, thank you, Stephen. I see a note, being genuinely interested in the other person. Yeah, so there it is. Curiosity is genuine. Great minds. You're you're focusing. It's hard to fake curiosity, I think, is another point of what Stephen's making. Here you go, Andrew, reminding yourself that you don't know everything. Nice. Yeah, there's a humility to this. A lot of what we're talking about, Andrew, is trying to release yourself from the ego. The ego is what dominates most conversations. We tend to be orienting everything through what's going on in our own head, and then we're taking the inputs of other people and putting them through our own mind. Curiosity is an attempt to place yourself and to try to abate the ego and focus your energy on the other person in a way that's genuine, in a way that you really do truly care, which again is hard to fake. You have to get in that mindset, but then also you're just reminding yourself that there's other people and that exist and that you don't have the full answer. So the other piece I want to focus on, aimlessness is interesting. Sales tends to have an objective, which is to get the other person to buy something. Curiosity is actually antithetical to that. So why is it here? We'll talk about that and how you frame it. But it actually, as a tool, can be very effective towards performance. But it is fundamentally, when done right, it's not directive towards a an outcome that you're trying to affect. It's really there for itself, but it can be used. Ironically, it can be used for achieving an outcome, but you have to. But the process itself is somewhat aimless. The final thing is it's felt. Curiosity is felt by the other person. So if you ever have been to a party and you meet someone and they start asking you about what you do or whatever, you know the difference between somebody who is asking because they're trying to size you up or they're trying to put you in some kind of box or try to figure out your deal so that they can mentally compartmentalize you versus someone who's legitimately interested in who you are and in what you do. And they're like, "Oh my gosh, that's interesting. Tell me more about that. That's fascinating." And those people just tend to be fun to be around. They're actually great party people because they tend to look around and try to find things about other people. Now, they are free to use all of that information you give them however they want. But when you're offering it, it almost feels like you feel that genuine care from them. And that's hopefully something you want your prospects to feel. So again, genuine. Being genuinely curious allows salespeople to shift the focus from selling into listening, from pushing into pulling. So that's why it's an effective tool, ironically, because again, it's not directed towards being a tool for sales. You're trying to be other oriented, but it ends up creating the conditions for what might be a potential positive outcome for you, the salesperson. Buyers can sense when you lead with an agenda versus a genuine desire to understand. So we're going to talk about guiding versus legitimate inquiry. So most people who have ever had a sale know that you have to ask questions. You can't just go straight into pitching. You have to understand what the person needs. So we're going to try to divide that. We're going to try to split the atom a little bit between when someone is asking questions with an agenda versus asking questions that are legitimately coming from a place of curiosity. So bad questions versus better questions. This is an AI generated image of somebody asking questions for a charity. That's why it says charity across the sweatshirt and also on the hat. So what is this? So have you ever been walking outside the Apple store or somewhere in LA or New York or wherever you are? And I shouldn't assume there's only two places in the world that people live. Wherever you are, if you're in a place where a lot of people are, that's why I picked those two places, sorry. You might encounter someone who's trying to raise money for some fund or whatever, right? And they typically will ask a question in which to engage you and stop your tracks before you go into the Apple store. And the question might be something like, "Excuse me, do you have 2 minutes to save the planet?" Okay, so that's the question. Do you have 2 minutes to save the planet? Now, that's not a real question. That is a guiding question. Obviously, if the planet is in peril and it's dying and you don't give them 2 minutes, you don't have 2 minutes to do that, you're a horrible person. So clearly, they're trying to set up a trap for you to fall into. There was, for better or for worse, political persuasion, a trap that was set at the State of the Union the other night by our president to try to put the opposition party in a place, which you could argue if that was a good move. You can argue if that was worth it or not. I'm not here to talk politics, but it was clearly a question that was meant to engage an audience to put them in a position that was a no-win. Well, fine if you're trying to score political points, maybe that's a good move. In sales, the goal is not to make someone feel stupid or to trap them, but rather to help them make better decisions. So we're going to try to ask better questions. The questions you want to ask are to lead with true exploration. So instead of pitching a feature or even asking a question about a feature, you want to lead with exploration, like what would success look like for you? What is your team navigating right now? What's your biggest challenge? How does that feel? Double clicking on that question. Oh, that's a challenge. What is that like for you? What does that create? What are some of the external challenges that have come up because of that primary challenge? Oh, I'm staying late at work, and then now my partner is mad at me because I get home late, and my kids or never see me. And these are extra challenges that snowball on top of the original challenge. That's all fair game for the salesperson. Obviously, there are limits to the type of questions you can ask, not going too personal, etc. We'll talk about that in a minute. But the whole point here is to try to get a true exploration and not put your product at the center. So this comes from a book that this theory is called Jobs to be Done, which many of you are in product and marketing. You probably have heard this. So Clay Christensen, he wrote some books like The Innovator's Dilemma, and he's a Harvard Business School professor and he runs a consultancy. And he talks about entrepreneurship and innovation. So in this book, Competing Against Luck, he talked about he popularized the idea that customers don't buy products, they hire them to do a job. So it's another way of thinking about here's a candle on my desk. Okay, so you can buy a candle or you can hire the candle to do a particular job. So what is the job to do of this candle? Feel free to chat or I can just speculate to you. But one job might be to create ambiance, to create warmth, to create what the Danes call hygge. Probably pronounced that wrong. Sorry, my Danish friends. Um, it is to create an environment or an atmosphere. It could be to change the energy. Carlos Santana lights a candle as a ritual on every stage, apparently, when he performs. Um, it could be to create warmth. Probably not a good hiring. Probably doesn't excel at that job, but that's there's a fire involved, right? So there's different jobs that the candle performs. And so when we think about this in sales, the questions we ask should not be, do you need a candle? The question should be, what creates a great environment for you in your home space? What creates warmth and coziness for you as a as a um, as a home dweller? Okay, so probably this was a bad example. So maybe I should have put something better in front of me so I can grab next time. All right. So the idea is that you want to be thinking about the job, the function, and that's really what customers care about. No customer cares about your product. They care about progress in their own world. So the cliche example is people don't need a quarter-inch drill; they need a quarter-inch hole, right? So milkshakes is one of the examples. I'm not going to go into that right now, but if you read the book, he starts the book off talking about how to sell milkshakes. So that's important because the questions we ask are often derived around the product itself. So I'll give you another example in a second, but the idea here is that when you're approaching a sales encounter, you kind of want to start with a clean slate. Um, Again, if you're hip to the chat, go ahead and write down some thoughts here. But what is it like engaging with a child? What does childlike wonder feel like when you're engaging with maybe a child you've interacted with, your own child or someone else? Or put another way, what is different about answering questions from a child versus answering questions from an adult? Yeah, perfect. Thank you. Andrew writes, lack of preconceptions. That's absolutely it. A child has not seen whatever you're talking about before. So part of the idea here is to go back and pretend you haven't seen this movie. What makes a stale sales environment when you've ever been sold something and they're talking to you like they're not talking to you, they're talking to you like you're an avatar for every deal they've ever had, like you're salesperson number seven coming in the door. Um, they're not that you can feel that it's stale or stiff because they know what you when you answer the question there's only three answers or so many they have a decision tree in their mind and they go, oh yeah, they're going to say this and then I'm going to say this, and again it's all kind of scripted in their minds. Salespeople actually talk about scripts. This is kind of dangerous because you start to stop treating the other person like a live entity, like a natural human. Instead, think of them as almost like a computer algorithm that you're trying to tweak based on a back and forth predictive algorithm. So one thing you can do is do your best to flush out any preconceived notions. Like when I look at this picture, I see a very cute kid, but I also see bougainvilleas, and I remember that when I took some of those bougainvilleas out because they of my yard because they have these really sharp thorns that cut your flesh up. And so when I look at that bougainvillea, I'm like to this kid, I'm like, be careful, you're gonna hurt yourself. And uh, that's because I have preconceptions. I have an experience that I have to try to get rid of if I want to enjoy the innocence of. I don't know what she's doing. She's looking at it. They don't smell like anything, but anyway, you get the idea. Start fresh. Okay, so I've been talking about this idea that it's aimless, it's other oriented. You're not focusing on your products or anything like that. That's great, but it is a tool for performance. So I want to bring that back to this jobs to be done thing that I just referenced a minute ago from the Competing Against Luck book. So obviously you have boundaries on what kinds of questions. You only have 30 minutes. You only have, a short encounter with people. You're not going to ask personal stuff. You're not going to ask, random things about their, background. You're going to ask things in the context of their job to be done, and how much how much trust you built up previously with them. So I'm going to give you a quick example of reading glasses. So here is another little tool I have here. So these are when I first started wearing reading glasses, I went to the lens crafters and I said, I need, they said I need reading glasses. And so they said, oh, your insurance will cover a pair of reading glasses, I think up to a certain amount. So I looked around and I found this pair of Ralph Lauren glasses, and I was like, "Oh, perfect, that's great." And they were like cheap enough that I could get them, so I grabbed them, and then I brought them over, and I said, "These are the ones I want." You said they'd be free, and she goes, "Yeah, yeah." And then she put the thing together, and she goes, "Oh, it's going to be $200 or something." I said, "No, you said it was free." And then she said, "Right, but these glasses have glare protection, and the glare protection, and they have UV, blue light, and all this stuff that wasn't free." And I said, "No, you said it's free. I don't want any of that stuff." So she said, "Fine, yeah, I'll take it all off." And then I got the free glasses. There were these, and you guys can see this glare, see that? Oh my gosh. So this glare situation is because I said, no, I want free glasses and I got them, but they're not actually what I want. So it was actually the free actually made me unhappy. If I would have received the offers that she gave me, I would have been happier. I didn't do it because I was focused on price, because I was focused on a commodity, because I had no relationship and she wasn't asking me any questions. So if she would have asked questions, she could have said to me, just out of curiosity, what do you do for a living? You're here to get reading glasses. Do you use reading glasses in your work? Yeah, actually, sometimes it's hard for me to. I work as a business consultant, and I I stare at a screen all day on Zoom for meetings. Okay. Do you ever find it hard to see the screen? Yeah. So you probably wear the reading glasses, right? Yeah. Okay. Um, Let me ask you. When you're on a Zoom meeting with what is it, a prospect? You said you're a consultant, so like a client or a prospect. Um, is it important that they see your eyes directly, that there's nothing hindering you from seeing them? Yeah, I want them to see my eyes so they can ha have a semblance of trust. They can start to realize I'm a real person. Okay, well, what would be really helpful for you? It's not free like we talked about, but I can offer for this amount of money. They have these anti-glare stuff so that you are able to be seen by your prospects. So you can see the example there that I ended up not getting something that I would have wanted to pay for because she didn't ask the right questions. And if she had, it would have helped her performance. Again, assuming that I'm going to put the glare-free ones that I ended up getting back. I went, see it? Isn't that better? I went back and I got what I needed because I had learned from my own experience. But I would have been happier if I would have got it on the first pair of glasses. So, um, what I'm trying to say is ask better questions. Because if you ask better questions and if you're genuinely curious, one, I'm not going to mind it because who doesn't want to talk about themselves? Oh, I do this for a living. Yeah, I'm a really important consultant, yada, yada. Um, and she's going to end up having a better performance because she's going to uncover uh, jobs that I have, a job to be done, which is to be seen by my customers in the eyes when I'm talking to them on Zoom. There's other jobs, but that's one of them. And she could have uncovered that relatively easily just by asking a couple of questions and being curious about me. Okay, so I want to wrap up and get to Q&A. Um, all of this again is focused around the customer. So when we talk about the customer, as we talked about last in the first session, you prepare for a meeting by trying to put yourself in the shoes of your prospect, by trying to think about what they might need, what they might be going through. And that's going to inform and create a better experience for you when you inevitably meet with them. Now that you're meeting with them, you had all these preconceptions and you're trying to harness compassion to prepare and think about their situation. Well, now you have a chance to actually correct your assumptions. Because when you started, we were just preparing, thinking about them, and you're trying to say, oh, they're running this business and it looks like they don't have these types of people in their business, so that must be hard for them. And you're coming up with a whole story in your mind. Well, now you can actually disabuse that story by getting the actual truth, or at least a version of the truth, by asking questions of your prospect. Now they're going to help you see a better picture. It's coming into more clarity. The blurriness is going away about what they're actually going through. That's what curiosity does. In the last session of this, we're going to talk about courage. So, really, everything's customer oriented, but so much so that the ego is almost obliterated in your preparation and in your curiosity when you're actually talking to them in presentation. In other words, you're not talking about yourself at all. You're only asking questions about them. The analogy that comes to mind is a sports one. In goal sports, sports where you're trying to get into a goal, like in soccer or hockey, there's a tremendous amount of play that's happening before someone takes a shot on goal. As if you like those sports, you'll know that the shot on goal is actually fairly rare in the game, and some people will suggest that makes soccer and hockey uh, maybe boring to watch because there's less action than in like a basketball game where they're shooting almost constantly. Um, uh, the difference there is that, and into basketball to some extent, you have passing and you have plays. The idea is to set up the highest percentage chance of when you do shoot, you're maximizing your percentages of success. And that happens by positioning, by setting screens, by moving around the field of play, the rink or the court, and to pass the ball to extend to open up the field a little bit, so that when you do shoot, you've increased your chances. That's what we're going to talk about in the final session. Is that now that you've done the work to really be with your customer, to try to inhabit their position through compassion, and then listen and learn from them and adjust your priors through curiosity. Courage is the last piece where you're going to propose, and now you've gained enough information to say, you know what, I think this is what you want. So the proposal process is where we start to actually talk. So really, the salesperson should be silent and not exhibiting what they think the answer is until the very end. And that's hard to do because, again, you're not a child. You have seen this movie before, but that's what we're trying to accomplish. So with that, I'm going to close up. You're free to reach out to me and you're free to meet with me using this QR code. So go ahead and scan it with your phone if you want and set in some times. All right, guys. Feel free to drop it in, but otherwise, thank you and go apply it. I'm happy to meet and talk about how this makes sense personally to you in your business, but thanks for all you joining today and go get it. Talk to you soon.